Hello, beloved ones. Thank you so much for joining us for Module 3 of Entheogenesis, True Healing with the Master Teacher Plants, Divine Sacraments, and Psychedelic Medicines. Today, we are going to be covering a vast topic that is so incredibly important when it comes to engaging in any healing modality, but most especially with the master teacher plants, shamanic, consciousness expanding practices, psychedelic medicines. Today, we are going to be diving in to the labyrinth of the past, understanding the nature of memory, past, trauma, and the paradox of time in our healing journeys. So to begin, I really want to honor and offer a prayer, both to welcome in each one of our higher selves, our higher guides, all of the resource, all of the different benevolent spirits that empower and overlight each one of our lives. I want to acknowledge this blessed earth and offer my gratitude, my reverence, my devotion, and the merit of this journey to the blessing of our Holy Mother, our Blessed Mother, Earth, Sophia, Gaia, Pachamama, Tonantzin, Tierra Madre, Demeter, and her names go on and on and on. This holy grounded being that gives us everything, this breath, this life, this body, memory, time, space, all these different beautiful aspects of the human journey. And as I was tuning in to this group, this non-local circle of empowerment, of healing, of spiritual maturity, and the reclamation of our sovereignty, I was remembering our beautiful Council of Elders, where we are in British Columbia, and how for many years there was a sweat lodge circle ceremony that happened once a month on the mountain that we actually live now, Crystal Mountain. And this circle of these beautiful friends and beloved elders and mentors offered this sweat lodge for 13 years. And at the beginning of each of the sweat lodge ceremonies, they would share this Hopi prophecy. And as I was tuning into the teachings today and module 3, it just felt so important to bring this prophecy in, for how we approach the present and the future is so important, even if it's coming from wisdom that's very ancient and in the past, such as prophecies. And we are truly living in the time of many, many, many converging prophecies from indigenous wisdom systems around the world, as well as the mystery schools and some of the hidden groups that have been working underground and behind the scenes for the benefit of all beings and the benefit of the evolution of consciousness on Gaia. So may we open our sacred space together with this powerful teaching and then dive into the labyrinth of the past. We are the ones we've been waiting for. You've been telling people that this is the 11th hour. Now you must go back and tell the people that this is the hour. And there are things to be considered. Where are you living? What are you doing? What are your relationships? Are you in right relation? Where's your water? Know your garden. It is time to speak your truth. Create your community. Be good to each other. And do not look outside yourself for the leader. This could be a good time. There's a river flowing very fast now. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid. They'll try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, keep our eyes open and our heads above water. And I say, see who is in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personal, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and our journey come to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and your vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and celebration. We are the ones we've been waiting for. That prophecy was compiled June 8th, 2000. And oh my goodness, the wisdom within this prophecy and these teachings has been and continues to be so relevant to this time, my life, our work, and our collective journey. So draw deeply, and we will put a recording of that in this week's deepening letter practice. And we are going to be diving into the labyrinth of the past. So to review what we have covered in the first two modules, true healing is awakening. And true awakening is an embodied healing experience. For Darcy and I, that is our baseline, like our litmus test for any experience within the expanded states of the entheogens or in a moment of deep connected meditation and journey work. Does what we experience and the wisdom that we have gleaned transform our consciousness and simultaneously transform our embodied experience? Because we can no longer live in a time of cognitive dissonance where the enlightened experiences and our day-to-day are so disconnected that we can be complete assholes. Excuse my language, but that's the truth. So for us, we see that without the journey of working with the master teacher plants and psychedelic medicines, as well as powerful shamanic practices like breath work, deep fast, shamanic journey work, if we're not in an integrated and integral approach where our healing is also an awakening process, and what are we awakening to? We're awakening to more and more to the truth of reality. And our healing journey then becomes this dance, this walk, holding the cultivation of wisdom, the cultivation of love, the cultivation of presence, the cultivation of discernment, compassion, kindness, peace, and presence. All of those in one integrated whole. And while the divine sacraments offer radical potential for healing and awakening, we need to have the ideal conditions for sacred space. So what we covered last week was understanding that some of the foundational tenets, energies, consciousness that needs to structure the field of any true sacred place where this level of healing can happen, that we must have an honor, really I would say, again, an embodied honor, because we all know what it's like to talk about these things, but not to actually live it. And we're gonna have a whole nother teaching on spiritual materialism, which is basically that, is knowing the teachings, but not living the teachings. We're gonna talk about that in a later module. But for now, the true expression of spiritual sovereignty, the honor and the holding sacred of our body autonomy, our free will, and our informed consent. These are non-negotiable assets, non-negotiable conditions for true healing. As we see it, there's one root disease, and that's the illusions of separation. When we're living within the illusions of separation, then we hold the patterns of pain and unprocessed trauma from the past in the living soma of our body, mind, spirit, because we are one integrated whole being, which guides us and leads us from the concept of trauma and the past into what I call the labyrinth of the past. So the labyrinth of the past is really an understanding of the shamanic lens of past, of time. And this is absolutely critical because almost all of our pain is caused by our memory of the past. Now, I've lived in, imbalance in my body where I've had chronic pain. This is, of course, different. That's actually the physical sensation of pain. Often the physical sensation of pain is informed by the past, but you're still experiencing that pain in the present. Now, emotional and psychospiritual trauma, which patterns the body, is held within the memory or the field of the past. So let's begin with speaking of trauma, and then we're going to break this down a little bit more, because this is absolutely critical information that honestly, while talked about from different fields like new science and leading edge trauma therapy and epigenetics and neuroplasticity, and then in shamanism, each one talks about this in a different way. But what I'm sharing with you is Darcy and I's bigger grokking as shamanic practitioners, having worked with, in hundreds and hundreds of circles with 20, 25 people in most of those circles over the last 12 years, 13 years of active practice. Before that was our apprenticeship. I'm sharing with you how we apply this to actually true healing and awakening. And so it's being informed by these different disciplines, these different fields of study, but recognizing that for the way that Darcy and I basically work with this is we love to learn from, an interdisciplinary view. However, then when we bring these ideas, these concepts, these practices to our ceremonial work, first for our own journey, and once we've done a lot of testing, then we bring that in as a potential practice to work with our community members, then it's got to be effective. It's got to actually work in the moment and also be simple enough that we can work with that as we are journeying with people in expanded states. So there we go. Let's start. Let's jump in. So in this day and age, it is critical that we are trauma-informed when stepping into the world of the divine sacraments. Honestly, the greatest harm happening within the plant spirit medicine ceremonial world and these different containers that are happening, oh my gosh, so many all over the place. I've heard that in New York City, there's like 500 ayahuasca ceremonies every weekend. Now, I don't know if that's true or if that's just hyperbole, but nonetheless, there's a lot of plant spirit medicine ceremonies happening all over the world now. And the biggest lack of awareness that I see within the traditional ceremonial containers, and then within what's being perpetuated by people who've learned in more traditional containers, is a lack of embodied compassion, care, and trauma-informed awareness. So to be trauma-informed within the psychedelic and entheogenic containers creates a space that we can finally begin to heal the incredible impact of harm, loss, suffering, pain, fear, the tragedies that honestly touch each of our lives at different times. And outside of all these different trainings and the courses offered like this, what what can't be overemphasized is that the most important energy or quality for true sacred space where we can actually heal the trauma of the past, be it low-level trauma, mid-range, or very intense high trauma, getting into the post-traumatic stress and complex trauma patterns that some of us find ourselves in. The single most important component is kindness, leading to compassion and patience. So first, we have to have that compassion with ourselves, and then we can extend that compassion to others who are suffering. And unfortunately, within a lot of different lineages, there can be subtle ways that people are not trained to truly show up from a heart-centered and compassionate place. I've honestly experienced a lot of dehumanization that I've seen and personally witnessed when someone is going through an intense traumatic catharsis, which I'm not a big fan of the catharsis model. I'm just going to say that. But however, when that trauma is being released and someone is very, very in the medicine, very altered, we are at our absolute most vulnerable. And I have been here multiple times. And there's been some times that I've been met with incredible kindness and compassion. And what happened through that was then a deeper level of resolution of that trauma. It resolved. That pattern was no longer active in my system in the same way. It's no longer pattern informing my actions, my words, and how I was living and treating myself. However, when I've been in this sort of big release of trauma, and I've been met with lack of compassion, judgment, a contextualization of that trauma in the form of, oh, this is an extraction, this is a demonic extraction, this is a release of some sort of bad spirit, then what can happen is people from that belief system then can isolate the person in catharsis. They can create a whole system of protection for the energetics that are being released. And depending on how this goes, like I've worked with so many people, and I also have experienced where actually the intervention and the discomfort of the practitioner created greater harm and more complex trauma because of how it was met. So really the maturity and how trauma-informed any practitioner is their capacity through their own personal healing journey to meet other people in their messy human journey and healing journey. And then also to recognize how much impact we as facilitators or sitters even have. And so this is a radical place that we really need to be informed on. And when we enter strong experiences of these expanded states of consciousness, these shamanic states of consciousness, our past will resurface. So this is going to include some form of trauma for everyone. How resourced, empowered, cared, and loved we feel. It's honestly the people who surround us and that we feel actually genuinely cared and loved by, or this is then creates the opportunity for post-traumatic growth. And this whole movement from post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth is really what the entire art of ceremony with the plant spirit medicines, and I would say psychedelic therapy, is all about. And honestly, in every single ceremony, people coming to work with us experience this, and it's awesome. It's the best thing ever to be with somebody who is in their own journey of connecting to their inner healer, communing, reclaiming their power, reclaiming their free will, their freedom to choose, and then taking something that has been a huge impediment in their life, that has shaped them in not healthy, good ways, to see that person from the inside out, finding that place of meaning-filled growth. It's the best. It's what keeps me showing up for this work, which sometimes is very challenging, takes a lot of work, a lot of energy, and is pretty much for Darcy and I been what we've completely devoted our lives to. Having somebody who comes to sit with us, make that inner shift, is the best. Is what keeps me showing up. It's honestly the greatest of the great, because that post-traumatic growth then becomes an experience where we grow wisdom, where that trauma then becomes a source of medicine, where that limitation from the past then becomes a way that we can be of service, greater discernment, and the cultivation of beauty in our lives and for our family, for everybody we work with, and in our communities. So it's very exciting. So basically, when you begin to work with shamanic experiences, plant spirit medicine, psychedelic medicine, shamanic breath work, even journey work with shamanic journey work will also do this. It's inevitable that our past is going to resurface. And we all have baggage. So it's inevitable that if you journey enough with this way, that your old baggage is going to come up. And recognizing that it's simply inevitable, this actually allows us to begin to prepare for that. And so many people who come to the plant spirit medicine ceremonies and psychedelic therapy, psychedelic medicines for this way, are coming because there's something that they can't access, reach in any other way. That like you wouldn't honestly sign up for something that might be the most difficult experience you can imagine, but ultimately productive, if you weren't ready for truth. And a lot of that truth is then experiencing and seeing and witnessing these past patterns. And so when we're ready to truly let the old baggage go is often the sacred call to these ceremonial ancient ways. However, it can be a thin line between trauma resolution and trauma activation. It's a thin line between trauma resolution and trauma activation. So it's really easy to take a psychoactive medicine and have your old baggage come up. In fact, like I said, it's pretty much inevitable. So how do we then meet that experience to move from the trauma pattern into the resolution and then the growth? And recognizing that it's such a thin line, this is why the components of sacred space, the conditions that we have to create for that container where true healing can happen are so critical. Because if I am somebody who has experienced childhood violation, and about, I think in our culture, 2 out of every 3 women have experienced some form of sexual abuse. 1 out of every 3 men has experienced some form of sexual abuse. So that is an intense violation of our body autonomy, the sanctity of our sexuality, the sanctity of our bodies. It's so deeply impactful. And being in a ceremony and recognizing that we're coming to heal from this type of violation, and that it's pretty much inevitable that it's going to come up at some point, we need to have discernment and wisdom. And honestly, I can't ever encourage you to think that the people that you're sitting with are going to know more what you need than what you already know, because you've been living with this pattern for so long. So using this as an example to move from greater fracturing into greater integral healing, because to heal means to make whole. So you're taking the fracture and you're actually going through a process of integrating that back into one coherent whole. The absolute critical factor is conscious awareness, loving presence, and recognizing what the previous trauma holds and what is just too much outside of what's known as a window of tolerance for you to really handle. And so for so many women that come to work with us that's experienced sexual abuse, it has been, and we've had this just happen over and over with people coming to work with us. It's a terrible idea to work with an all-male ceremonial crew, especially in, say, a more masculine or machismo style, if you've experienced sexual abuse from a man when you were a child. So there's some things that you just have to construct ahead of time. But then from that, to be working with a facilitator, working with a practitioner who has already journeyed in that way before, who can hold space and hold the big love, trust vibe, that as this pattern comes up, that it's actually coming into consciousness to be released. And what re-traumatizes almost 100% of the time is if you're taking too much medicine too fast. It's too much, too fast, too intense. And yeah, you'll probably survive it. You'll make it through. But over and over and over, we have people coming to us that have started with post-traumatic stress. And then because they went into spaces with the plant medicines that were not truly conducive to true healing and all these different factors that we're outlining in this course, that then they left that ceremonial work with complex post-traumatic trauma. And that's a whole nother process to work with that takes a very experienced practitioner. And that has become a huge part of the work that we do with people, is actually healing from ceremonial trauma and then getting to that deeper trauma. And so truly, we need a holistic integral system where we're working with the leading edge Western therapeutic approaches, and then bridging that with a holistic wisdom and of the earth honoring traditions. So we have the traditional healing systems, and we have the leading edge new therapeutics, new science. And this allows us to have a more holistic view. And we want to have the most holistic view possible to meet our healing journey, because now it really matters. You didn't come to this life just to live in a traumatized state. Your soul chose to be incarnated to bring a very specific medicine and blessing here. And none of us can do that if we're just so burdened by our past that we live a half life. Or for people like me, that much stress has informed our body so much that we're really sick. And we need to find holistic, integral healing modalities. So Peter Levine, who's one of the leading therapists and teachers of somatic experiencing, says trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of an empathic witness. Once again, trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside in the absence of empathic witness. So this brings us back to the healing paradox, which I spoke about in module 2, that healing is an inside job that we cannot do alone. So the paradox is that each one of us has to take 100% responsibility for our healing journey. That's the only way healing even begins. Otherwise, it's like we're just swimming in an eddy over and over and not getting anywhere. So the first step on our own personal journey is to take 100% responsibility, as in the ability, the choice to consciously respond to everything in our lives. Outside of the judgment of, is it right or wrong? Is it fair? Without worrying about our past karma from this life or previous lifetimes. To just get to the business of responding and being responsible for our experience. And simultaneously, without that empathic witness, we don't heal in the same way. There's no possible way that we can meet this past challenge and trauma without that connected common unity. Now, there's times where that empathic witness, is nature, is a spirit, is a guide. But I would say overwhelmingly, it actually is another human. Why? I don't really know. It's just absolutely my experience. And so when we work with this understanding of, okay, this happens from within, I've got to do the heavy lifting, I've got to do the work, and I can't do it alone. That also then begins to inform that sacred space. Because then instead of coming to a practitioner or a circle, looking to them to do the work for us, or believing that they even can, or falling into their belief that they are the healer, that instead we move into this beautiful place where we're able and willing to show up for ourselves. And once we're willing to show up for ourselves, then we can actually start to have the wisdom and self-reflective discernment, the intrinsic awareness of what we need to really the qualities that we need in a practitioner, or the qualities that we need in a circle of friends. Awesome. So as we're talking about the past and the labyrinth of the past, there's also a paradox of the past, which is we are embodiments of the past, which only exists in the present. So as we are embodiments of the past that only exist in the present, we then move into a bigger understanding that I'll share my grokking with you. Take what works for you, leave what doesn't. Here's my grokking, my understanding from my direct experience, that the past is a field of power. And this is spoken about within the Kamaska Curanderismo lineages of Kamaska Curanderismo from the north coast of Peru. This is one of the teachings that was given to us through the Pachacuti Mesa tradition. And the understanding of this powerful template, the sacred geometry in the form of an altar that helps us to pattern and understand the nature of our consciousness. It's very powerful technology. And also one of the bonuses for this course is an intro to the Pachacuti Mesa with Donna Oscar Mira Casada, our beloved mentor and elder and cosmic companion. And so this field of the past is one expression of the universal intelligence that we are. Now, we are the leading edge of universal consciousness as we know it. All of the past and the evolution of our universe has led to you and me here and now in this moment of being. And there's multiple levels of intersecting intelligence, all working together within us in one synergistic whole, which expresses as the miracle of life, here and now. We're only ever now, which is always here. In time, space, there's a here and now. Now, every level of our body holds memory. The water in our bodies hold memory, and our bones are like a crystal. And within the living crystal matrices of our bone structure is water. Every part of our body, all the levels of living soma, hold and carry memory. The memory is from this life and beyond, because we are not an island unto ourselves. We are an informed, responsive being held within a larger beingness. And within that larger being, there's many different levels of information, all broadcasting simultaneously. And this body is a living supercomputer. It's so far beyond that we don't really have a word for how radically intelligent every cell, let alone the entire body, is. And so with the nature of the past, we tend to, in our dominant culture, consider the past, inquire into the nature of past very rarely. We tend to take our past very personally. We tend to take our past very personally, and we tend to live and never question the nature of past. We tend to live as though our memories of the past are true and absolute. We tend to believe that we are right about the past, and we'll hold on to this rightness, this righteousness about how we've been wronged. The illusion of the past begins to fall apart when we step onto the path of sincere healing. And this is a humbling journey, because at some point we come to the threshold of our own righteousness. And from the past, we create complex identities. From all of our stories of the past, the memories that we take to be true and absolute, when in new science reality, very few of our memories are actually 100% accurate. And in fact, the nature of memory is very fickle and ever-changing and mutable. However, we tend to take what we remember to be absolutely true. And we will stake our claim on that, and that claim, that righteousness is where we all at some point on our journey come to the end of. And to pass through this threshold and truly begin to heal, we have to make a choice. I have to make this choice. You have to make this choice. To me, this is just part of the healing journey. Would I rather be right or heal? Would I rather be right or happy? Letting go of being right is letting go of all the identity we have formed our beliefs around. Now, this doesn't mean we're wrong. I'm just so tired of that binary, right and wrong. Oh, we just cause ourselves so much pain and suffering and war and devastation by this whole right, wrong binary. So this isn't in any way to say that we're wrong. It's just, what if we're not absolutely right? What if it's not exactly the way that we have told ourselves? What if it's actually not true? Or even if it is true, maybe we can let it go. And so this sense of right and wrongness about the nature of past becomes something that we have to reconcile. And this reconciliation can be in the form of therapy, which honestly, I have told so many people just in the last 4 years, the most important thing at this point is not more medicine work, it's getting a really good therapist that's somatically informed, that's trauma informed, and that you resonate with. Because there's just certain things that nothing but good therapy is going to touch. However, being a shamanic practitioner, and Darcy and I in our practice, we work with a different aspect of the healing, which is diving into the deep inner world known within the Andean worldview as the Uku Pacha, the interior world, which holds the past as well as I would say, the great super unconsciousness, the super consciousness. And then from there, renegotiating, reforming, taking one remembrance and looking at it anew, remembering. And often in that remembering, there's a liberation that takes place of, wow, it's just not exactly how I thought it was. Or a sense of deep, compassionate understanding for the people that we felt have wronged us. That all of a sudden there's a capacity to have compassion, see their humanity, recognize that they are also have been caught in a victim-perpetrator bonding cycle that has gone on for countless generations. You know, this ability to expand and to shift our consciousness so that we can have a greater perspective, more awareness, more space around the patterns we've been inhabiting. So then we can become conscious of those patterns, and then we can transform those patterns. So with this, what's critical to understand is that all trauma is from the past, but it's held in the present. And that trauma, in the way that we view it, is a multidimensional, full sensory expression of suffering. It can be our greatest source of pain. However, once it's turned to, and once that trauma pattern is brought into the light of loving kindness, it's brought into the light of compassion and wisdom and love and medicine, it can be our greatest gift. It truly can. And how the Kamaska Curanderos of the Curanderismo see the past and have worked with the past is as a field of power that's negotiable. And I just love this because I actually find this to be absolutely true. However, I have to step into that shamanic awareness where I'm all of a sudden conscious and have the ability to mythically construct a new view of the nature of my experience of reality, identity, self, or if I'm in service to another, assist them in that mythic expansion where the past is less a fixed thing and much more patterns, entangled webs, and memory loops that express in the nature of our conscious awareness as neuroses, as self-harm, as reactivity, as triggers. And once we shine the light of awareness into the inner world, which is often unconscious, so we call it shadowed or dark, but not dark as in negative or evil, but dark as in not fully illuminated, then we can begin this renegotiation process, this reweaving, this repatterning. And we then start to take our past less personally. Because almost all of it, even though if it's our own memory, it's an intergenerational thing. It's a pattern that has been passed down in what's known now as intergenerational trauma. And that can happen in our family systems, but what many are unaware of is that also happens through our collective. So we have our own personal memory, we have our ancestral memory, we hold collective memory, and we also hold soul memory. And so we have people coming with past life memories springing up. We have people with tapping into collective memory, ancestral memory, or just the challenges and the tragedies that can happen to us as children. Now, all these different levels of memory cause different impacts into the field of our conscious awareness. And the plant medicines in particular, and the psychedelic medicines as well, although I'm more of an advocate and a devotee of the sacred plant medicines for reasons I will get into more throughout this journey with you, that these plant medicines work as a light bulb. They illuminate what was unseen, unconscious in the dark before. And then the practitioner is the empathic witness. And that loving presence of both the community member, whoever we're going to work with or that's sitting with us, and the practitioner, and then the plant create this incredible field of potential where very deep resolution is possible. So deep that then that trauma moves from a wound of pain that bleeds out pain and, these heavy feelings into our lives, transforms from that into a gateway of medicine, of power, of wisdom, of compassion. And so often informs our sacred path of service going forward. For where we really truly hold medicine in our beings is through the healing of our past. And one of my favorite understandings about this comes from Kaya Ra, who is the author of the Sophia Code, which is so beautiful and powerful. And she said, she has a saying that says, everything that we transform becomes soul power. And so this is why many of us are called to the plants to transform not our own trauma, but the intergenerational trauma, our ancestral trauma that we've inherited. And when we do so, and we are the one who is willing within our family line to meet that which has been unresolved, then we gain soul power from that process. And that is what propels our shamanic healing medicine practitioner path. So to close, we have this beautiful confluence of these ancient wisdom tradition understandings and then new science. And a lot of the new science is now showing why the ancient shamanic medicines and arts are so powerful. So we have this previous paradigm that's really now, in so many of us, been broken down. But only like 2 decades ago was absolutely considered to be true by almost all medicine, like allopathic medicine. And it's the understanding or the idea, the theory of genetic predeterminism, which sees the body as a machine and the brain as a holder of memory. And what, within this, the brain was seen as to be in a continual state of slow decay, which that's paradigm sucks, but that's what we were believing up until about 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And within this genetic predeterminism, there was this idea that everything is in our bodies is set by our genes. So within the story of genetic predeterminism, there was a idea that your brain just slowly degraded and there was nothing that you could do about it. There's nothing you could do to change the quality of your cognition, AKA your perception, your experience, your outlook on life. And every year your brain cells died more until you slowly broke down. Oh, it's terrible. There's also a story that your brain cells would never regenerate and that psychedelics would kill off brain cells. And this, of course, was part of the war on drugs campaign. And we know now was completely not based in any science, and yet definitely scared a lot of people off from expanding their consciousness. So new science shows us why the ancient shamanic arts are so powerful and why these indigenous wisdom systems and these medicine ways from around the world are so helpful for so many of us. So I want to just for a few moments break down the new science understanding of the nature of memory, epigenetics, neuroimmunology, neuroplasticity, and the divine sacraments. So before we get to where we are, just to reflect a little bit, about 15 years ago, these new forms of medicine and understanding began to be articulated by really leading edge scientists. But before that, there was a very strong collective belief that was held that was rooted in genetic predeterminism. And this is really the understanding also anchored into this idea that is coming from the scientific reductionist materialist paradigm, seeing the body and the world as a machine. And in some ways, in allopathic medicine, this is still very active in the specialization of many doctors, which honestly makes so much sense to go see a podiatrist for your foot versus, a brain surgeon. There's rationale behind this, which I really appreciate, because honestly, the specialized medicines within allopathic traditions do help us. And I'm all for integral medicine, which does not leave out Western medicine, but also does not raise it above any other form or any other cosmovision of the body. However, this understanding that the body is a machine and that, we are literally just the sum of our parts, and that our genes determine how our body acts. And really, there's nothing we can do about it. You have the genes that you have, and they stay the same. And if you get sick, it's because of your genes. Now, there's a lot of people who still believe this, which blows my mind. Also, within this understanding was this idea that your brain is a holder of memory. We now know that's not necessarily true, that the brain is more a receiver of memory, but that the brain holds memory, and the brain is in a slow and steady, continual state of decay. And the story was that the older you get, your brain slowly starts to degrade, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Like, oh, it's a terrible belief. Oh, no wonder people are so depressed when they're believing that. And that beyond not being able to really do anything to change your brain, as your brain cells would die more and more every year, that your cognition, your perception, your acuity, and those higher functionings of your consciousness would start to just break down as well. And that as your brain cells died every year, they would not replenish, and that psychedelics actually killed off your brain cells. So you really didn't want to take psychedelics because you only have limited brain cells and they'll kill brain cells and there's no way for those to regenerate. And this was a conscious campaign in the war on drugs that did actually keep people away from the psychedelics. It's a scary story. I don't want to kill off my limited brain cells and perpetuate my slow but steady decline into cognitive, slow but steady decline into cognitive puddledness, something like that. You get where I'm going. So this within genetic predeterminism is an idea that your body as this very complex machine is operated from, and that you can, bring in different parts, take out different parts, but there's really nothing you can do about what your body expresses in the form of disease. Basically, underlying this is the belief that you are a victim of life. You are a victim of the universe. You are a victim of your genes. And then your family was also a victim of the genes, so on and so forth, back, reaching back through time. And then inherent in this is that you really don't have any power to change your life, let alone change your health. And by the way, organic food does not do anything. No. So obviously, many of us rejected this and turned to other healing modalities. I'll still remember the moment after I first came back from Peru, my first trip there, and I had this, this transformation on every level of my body, which I'd been working so hard for a decade. And I still had a ways to go because I needed to rebuild my body from the intense deficiency that had been accumulated through my illness. But I was finally like feeling good and feeling empowered and feeling like all my work, like the merit of that was manifest in my body, and I was feeling good. I was feeling healthy, which was amazing. And I was in a master's, closing up my master's program. And I kept avoiding my coursework by reading new science books like Lynn McTaggart, and when Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, came out. I remember the moment I was sitting in front of the health food store that I was working at, and I was reading The Biology of Belief, and I was like, I knew it. I never bought the genetic predeterminism, but there was no reference for healing and transforming on the level that I did until I began to learn about epigenetics. And Bruce Lipton's work is just so incredible. So, this understanding from new science now that's coming out is painting a very different picture. It's so beautiful and it's so vast. And, a lot of the understanding of epigenetics that Bruce Lipton really brought to the world for the first time, I consider him like a mystic and a geneticist and a scientist, is that, that what determines our genetic firing of how our genes are expressing is the environment. It's what causes health and disease, and our stress response to life is actually being informed by the environment. And this environment is so multi-leveled and multifaceted. We could call it the vibe. That's actually kind of what I call it, because the environment is one piece, but it's also all of the felt, sensed inner knowingness about life that we are receiving, every breath, every heartbeat. And then as children, that we are not, from a mental view, conscious of, in that we understand everything that's happening and can identify it, but we feel it and we are informed by it. And the field of epigenetics is, the understanding that the environment, AKA the field, affects our cellular expression. And this process of epigenetics is where the readability or the expression of our genes is modified without changing the DNA code itself. So there's tiny chemical tags added or removed to our DNA in response to changes in the environment in which we are living. So this is evolution happening in real time versus over, many generations or, countless generations. So then these tags turn our genes off and on, offering a way of adapting to changing conditions without inflicting a more permanent shift in our genes. So basically, it's our cellular, our genomes, which are like sensory antennas. And so this understanding of epigenetics has then radically informed how we understand the nature of trauma through research in the new science communities that have been able to track certain genetic expressions, certain expressions of health, such as obesity or different illnesses, from the intergenerational trauma lens. That it's the overwhelming stress that we experience that we can't resolve because we don't have that empathic witness, as Peter Levine shared, that then begins a pattern that moves through generation to generation. And there's a medicine wheel teaching from one of our elders, Duncan Grady, that shares what we don't transform, we transmit. What we don't transform, we transmit. And if you look at our world today, that's basically the human experience. It's like so much untransformed information, trauma, experience, stress that has been transmitted and is being transmitted to the younger and the current generations. And so this inheritance on one level is what a lot of us are coming to the master teacher plants and psychedelic medicines to heal, to work with, and requires a shamanic understanding. It requires a broader understanding of the nature of consciousness, soul, life, spirit. And then from there, we can begin to move into that field of past and reweave it, renegotiate it, repattern it. But first, we have to have the light of awareness. There's no healing without consciousness. In fact, healing is awakening. So that means expanding in our states of consciousness to be able to see and witness, and through that seeing and witnessing and the compassion in our hearts, transform the old patterns into more beautiful patterns, new patterns. And from the understanding of epigenetics, we move into the leading understanding of the nature of memory. Now, what I find so interesting about some of the leading memory researchers is that, how as we study memory, we can really begin to understand more the nature of consciousness. What's important to understand here is that over 50% of what we remember did not actually happen the way we remember it. So this has been shown through examples of eyewitness testimony, which now are being rejected. Eyewitness testimony is now being rejected because of how inaccurate memory can be in many states in the United States and some provinces in Canada. So there's what's known as flashbulb memories, such as 9/11, which has been researched in depth by memory researchers. And these flashbulb memories actually slowly change over time as our perspective changes. And so we can have a very intense experience, but as we grow and change through time, our how we remember that experience grows and changes as well, in sometimes radically divergent ways to our first recollection of it. It's really interesting stuff. And then what I feel is one of the most relevant, however, one of the most disturbing aspects of the nature of memory is how easy it is to insert false memories. It's crazy easy. It's crazy easy to insert false memories. And this memory hacking is made easier in altered states of consciousness. So basically, what is needed is a hypnagogic state and implicit but not informed consent to memory hijack. So let's take this an example that was through the woman who wrote a book on this, is a research project done where college students were brought through guided meditations to a time in their past where a false memory was inserted. And so for those college students, it didn't take getting really high on the world's most psychoactive substances like it does in the ceremonial world or psychedelic therapy world. It just took a guided meditation and then an authority figure. And so when we then recognize that inserting false memories is relatively simple if you have the power structure at play and you have a hypnagogic state, an altered expanded state where we're highly suggestible, then it's even easier. And this is a huge, huge red flag for why having intense discernment ahead of time and vetting of practitioners that you work with is so critical. I've literally worked with dozens of people who've had some form of inserted false memory. There's a lot more I could say, but for honoring our time here, it's just for your awareness, for your information. And so when we have, an understanding of the nature of memory, and then these different aspects of memory, and then that memory informs the field, we can have false memories from our ancestors or from our own life that are so powerful that they're actually affecting our genetic markers and what's manifesting through our body. And then with that, we can move into the field of neuroimmunology, which is basically the understanding of how stress impacts our immune system. And, this piece of understanding is so radically important as we move into working with the expanded states of consciousness, because we're working with transforming our consciousness, transforming the past, which informs our triggers and our stress response. And this aspect of neuroimmunology is really the study of crosstalk between the central nervous system and the immune system of our bodies. So this is basically how our response to life impacts our health. And there's just amazing work being done around this. And this is, to me, an incredibly important part of my own healing journey and so many people that I'm working with. So neuroplasticity, just to recap, is the brain's continual capacity to grow and evolve in response to life experiences. This plasticity, neuroimmunology. So there's amazing work being done around the understanding of stress, the central nervous system, and our immune system. And this is something that arises in pretty much every ceremony that I sit in with others. And it's been a huge part of my journey, is recognizing how the response to life is informed from all this past. And as we start to see the past more clearly, then that changes how we respond to the present and the future. And so you start to see this infinity loop where the present is always the point of power. And yet this light of conscious awareness into the labyrinth of the past then allows this repatterning for the present and the future. And wildly, on the somatic level, this stress response has a lot to do with the environment that we grew up in, the environment that we live within, what we believe to be true, and then our conscious and unconscious response to that. And luckily, anything that's unconscious with awareness and intent, we can slowly bring greater consciousness to. And this leads us back, kind of circling around to neuroplasticity. And neuroplasticity is really what gets highlighted more, I feel, with the psychedelic therapy and the third wave of the psychedelic renaissance, is this understanding that the brain, the mind, the brain's capacity is continually growing and evolving in response to our life experiences. This plasticity is capable, this plasticity is the capacity to be shaped. Plasticity is the capacity to be shaped, molded, and altered. Neuroplasticity then is the ability for the brain to adapt and change over time. Now, if we believe that the brain only adapts and changes in an entropic pattern, well, then that's what we're going to experience. But if we have a different understanding that's now developing, well, we're going to experience radically new ways of expressing our consciousness. And the brain, as it grows and it adapts over time, creates new neurons, building new neural networks. Historically, scientists believe the brain stopped growing after childhood, but now we know that, and the current research shows, that the brain is able to continue growing and changing throughout our lives. And it refines its architecture or shifts functions to different regions of the brain. The importance of neuroplasticity can't be overstated. It means that it is possible to change the dysfunctional patterns of thinking and behaving into new patterns, new consciousness, new ways. And this is, of course, what Dr. Joe Dispenza and other leaders in the field have been emphasizing through their work. And I'm so grateful. It's so helpful to have this scientific paradigm for those of us who are bridging science and the West and shamanism. And so, as you know, Dr. Dispenza shares, our thoughts and what thoughts we choose create our neural networks. The neural networks and their firing then impact our neuropeptides and our hormones. This sends the epigenetic signals to our cells. From here, the DNA selection and regulation is modulated in our being. And then that affects the expression of proteins, and proteins are the expression of life, and that is the health of our bodies. So all of this, the shamanism and then new science becomes relevant when we're working with sacred teacher plants and psychedelic medicines, because it shines the awareness on the most important thing. That when we change our consciousness and the energetic conditions of the field, AKA we create sacred space, then we create an environment where we can repattern the deepest places within our being back into, or into for the first time, the most ideal expressions of health, wholeness, presence, consciousness, love, creativity, wisdom, innovation, inspiration, that ability to be so grateful and so happy. All of these things can be repatterned into the ever evolving, ever transforming nature of self. And so this process is, something that is a learning journey for our own healing. And then when we become practitioners, is learning how do we create those conditions where that environment is so saturated, is so rich in what every human being needs for health and well-being, that inner healer just naturally awakens. And that's, part of what we're addressing in this journey. Although to become a practitioner in this way is a much longer apprenticeship. However, from this course, you will have more information than 95% of people in the psychedelic third wave. And, from there, I'm going to close by recognizing that in the shamanic traditions of Peru, these different aspects of how we get impacted and then how we transform it have been understood for a very long time. And while the understanding of how greatly we're impacted by harm, which is known as daño, susto, shock, different forms of trauma, that we can begin a process of bridging the new science with these reverent ceremonial containers, and then reform and repattern ourselves from the labyrinth of the past back into our empowered present self. And yeah, there's a lot of defragging from artificial constructs, past ideas, false beliefs, false memories, and just the hangover of thousands of years of empire consciousness impacting the human heart and spirit. There's some work to do, and there's defragging, but together we've got this. On my own, no way. But walking beside you, walking with you in this journey, we've got it. And I'm super stoked. So please bring all of this information into the altar of your heart. Allow it to resonate, to contemplate what has been shared. Bring the prajnaparamita, the cutting sword of your intellect, to the altar of your heart. Take what works for you, leave what doesn't, and really enjoy diving into this richness of teachings. Thank you so much for your willingness to journey with me through these teachings with so much love. Ayumasi Kanapa. We are all one family, all my relations.